First, I'd like to apologize for the extremely long gap in uploads. I got a new job in a new state, and my desktop did not make it through the move unharmed. That's also why my look is so different, but I'm hoping to get my old files back. Today I'm going to talk about my history with creationism. As a child, I attended an evangelical Protestant church. While there was some diversity on the exact age of the earth among the people there, they all seemed to agree that evolution simply did not occur except within restricted kinds. There was also no doubt that the flood of Noah was a historical event that flooded the whole earth and killed all land animals that were not in the ark. Like most boys, I love dinosaurs, but my mind for trivia led me to learning all about taxonomy even before high school. By the time I hit 8th grade, I could identify virtually any mammal by class and family, and knew what theropods, sauropods, and ceratopsians were. Bear in mind though, this was in the 1990s, and the rise of phylogenetic taxonomy was still a bit off, and biologists were still trying to stuff various clades into a Linnaean taxonomy, rather than just giving clades names and largely forgetting about the idea that clades should be ranked across taxa. When I was first introduced to the evidence for evolution in school, I, of course, didn't buy it, because it conflicted with what I had already learned in church, which included creationist literature, such as books by Henry Morris and Duane Gish, as well as the next generation of creationists, such as Kent Hovind. However, I also realized how evolution seemed plausible, since it explained, or seemed to explain, the hierarchy of organisms I already knew about from my taxonomic knowledge. Why is it that whales are mammals? Well, God just decided to make sea creatures who couldn't breathe underwater. Or, some group of mammals found it more and more useful to spend time in the water. While I saw the explanatory power of evolution, I still knew many of the objections that creationists made, such as that the required transitional forms were missing, and they were unviable in their hypothetical form. After all, what use is half an eye or half a wing? I was pretty happy about that until two events happened. I don't remember in which order they happened, or in exactly what year, it having been a while since then. I do remember that both occurred after I had gotten to high school. One event was that a friend of mine, who sometimes came to church with my family, had said that he had shown his biology teacher some of the creationist literature he had gotten at church. According to him, the teacher's response was simply laughter, because all of the objections in the pamphlet in question were trivially easy to dismiss. This surprised me, as I had thought that these objections were quite good and seriously damaging to the cause of biological evolution. The other event was that my church's youth group decided to host a creation-evolution debate. But rather than going to get someone who actually accepted evolution, they just decided to have me argue in favor of evolution, even though they knew I was a creationist. I did some prep work, which, if I recall correctly, included stumbling upon top origins. However, I still went into this debate as a creationist playing devil's advocate. I call it a debate, but only because that was the plan. It was not what happened. What actually happened is that even during my opening, I was openly heckled by the members of the youth group who were not debating, usually with them saying things that were so laughably absurd that I was confused that they even bothered saying them. One thing I remember clearly is being asked how anyone could tell that a fossil of a worm was not simply a fossil of a tree twig. This got so bad that one of the adults there stepped in and assured everyone that I was a creationist. I was shocked that not only were the objections so emotional, but that they were also so ludicrous. Combined, these two events made me question my creationism. If creationist objections to evolution were so easy to dismiss, and the defense offered by creationists I knew so quickly turned to simple invective, maybe there was more to this evolution than I knew. Unfortunately, my high school biology teacher was not exceptionally well versed on the topic. But I returned to talk origins to do more study. I checked all the objections of evolution I was familiar with, and I chased down other topics that came up as I was reading. I read about morphology, genetic similarity, observed instances of speciation, the nested hierarchy of taxonomy, etc. I found out that many of the questions in creationist literature were in fact quote mines. I saw photographs and technical drawings of the transitional fossils that I had been told simply didn't exist. I learned about the geological evidence that conclusively ruled out the possibility of Noah's flood. At this point, that was it. I rejected creationism, although I didn't make waves at church or at home. The closest I came to being outed about my acceptance of evolution was when I once brought home a copy of Darwin's Origin of the Species and was questioned by my mother as to why I was reading that book. Rather than simply saying that I accepted evolution and wanted to read the book that had proposed natural selection, I deflected, saying that I thought it was important to read books that had greatly affected the world, whether or not they were right. Now, to be clear, I do in fact agree with the excuse I gave my mother. You should read such books, including the Qur'an, the Bible, the Bhagavad-gita, The Origin of the Species, The Prince, and The Art of War, and in fact, I've included links to them in the video description. But by the end of high school, I was a theistic evolutionist. I didn't lose my faith over evolution, and whether I ever lost it isn't something I plan to address on this channel. You may be wondering what I think of my friends and family still entrenched in the creationist movement. Well, for one, I don't think they're being dishonest or evil. We have a difference of belief, and that isn't generally a reason for me to break off a friendship. On the other hand, I have a totally different opinion of the people who are the leaders of the creationist movement, such as Kent or Eric Hovind and Ken Ham. These people know that what they're saying is lies. I've seen them corrected too often to believe otherwise. I think they are frauds who continue their BS for the sake of money, or because they think lying is okay as long as it leads to a saving faith in Jesus. I sincerely hope it's the latter, since at least then they're lying for a reason I can understand, if not agree with. Eventually, I did make it known to my church that I accepted evolution, and a lot of people were surprised. And I want to tell you about a conversation that I had about that. I was talking to the church's new youth pastor, who I was friendly with, despite at this point not being in the youth group, having surpassed the age for it. He had asked me about a fair number of creationist objections with which I was already familiar and could easily rebut, and he still wasn't buying evolution. I realized it was because he was convinced the Bible flat out said there was no such thing as evolution. So I asked him, suppose that the Bible said the sky were purple, and not just at sunrise or something, but that the normal daytime color of the sky were purple. I half expected him to evade the question by saying the Bible didn't say that. I was surprised that he instead answered the question directly and told me that he would believe the Bible and try to understand why his senses didn't seem to agree. That was the moment I knew I could never be a creationist again. Right then I knew that even if the Bible were the Word of God, if some part of it contradicted physical reality, my only options were to reject the Bible or not take it literally. And it is clearly true that there are parts of the Bible, such as the creation and flood accounts of Genesis, which simply cannot be true if taken literally. Before I go, I want to relay one minor event which happened at my church while I was already more than halfway to accepting evolution. A creationist whose name I do not remember came to talk to the church. It was a special event and not part of the normal services. He said two things that I took issue with, even then. The first was that order could not come out of random events, and the second, that we had to take Genesis literally. After his talk, I went to speak with him directly, as he was milling about socializing with the congregants. First, I said that simple shaking could take a container of chips or sand or whatever and sort the contents from largest particles on top to smallest on bottom, and that clearly this was an increasing order. He simply denied that this sorting by size constituted order, and when I asked him why, he simply laughed. I also asked him why we should take the creation accounts literally when he said in his own speech that the phrase, the floodgates of heaven, did not mean that the sky had literal gates that were holding back waters from Earth. At this point he said something about spaceflight, and his wife pulled him away. This event wasn't as important as the others, but it did serve to impress on me that creationist leaders could not really be trusted, unlike scientists, who tended to cite numerous pieces of evidence, much of which could be found in their bibliographies, etc. Well, there you go. That's a summary of my exit from creationism. It didn't end my faith in God, although my current opinion on that isn't something I plan to get into here. I hope this gives you some context for why I care about the topic of creationism and evolution. Hopefully I'll start uploading a little more often, and even get back my old files, so you can see a return to the look I intended for this channel.